in an interview with the president's former national security advisor, Michael Flynn. A judge had ordered the special counsel to respond to the charge by this afternoon, and it did, forcefully. According to the special counsel filing, Michael Flynn, as a seasoned military officer who dealt regularly with the Bureau, knew he should not lie to federal agents. It also says the idea that Flynn was tricked into lying is false. Now, Flynn has accused the FBI's then Deputy Director Andrew McCabe of suggesting that he should not bring a lawyer to that interview. It's a move George Washington University law professor Jonathan Turley calls highly irregular.
And what did they get from Flynn, right? They got from him that he met with the Russians, which was neither illegal nor unprecedented. He failed to say that they talked about sanctions. But then they intentionally didn't bring that up to him. But the agents at the time said apparently that they didn't believe he was lying. And then Mueller decided to go back and charge him. It became a canned hunt. They put this guy in a cage and they shot him.
Flynn's sentencing is set for this Tuesday. He's facing up to 6 months in prison, though the special counsel's office has recommended that he serve no jail time, Jason.
Kristen, thank you very much. Also today, Good Morning America aired a sit-down interview with President Trump's former lawyer, Michael Cohen, following his sentencing of 3 years in prison for lying to Congress and campaign finance violations, among others. During the interview, Cohen described how he wants to be remembered. Take a look.
Did you know what you were doing?
I'm angry at myself because I knew what I was doing was wrong. I stood up before the world yesterday and I accepted the responsibility for my actions. The actions that I gave to a man who, as I also said in my elocution, I was loyal to. I should not be the only one taking responsibility for his actions. One of the hopes that I have out of the punishment that I've received, as well as the cooperation that I have given, I will be remembered in history as helping to bring this country back together.
Wow. Of course, the media had a field day following the interview. Watch this.
We already now know that the president has committed a felony in order to obtain the office of the presidency.
A case has been built this week that the president was not legitimately elected.
That is literally a checklist for how a campaign finance violation becomes criminal.
Trump is in real trouble for a variety of reasons.
Every day, we learn more information to show just how involved he was in this conspiracy, which I think prosecutors believe ultimately led to a felony.
The media is also going crazy over reports of an investigation into illegal donation to President Trump's inauguration. But where was the collective meltdown over Obama's second inauguration being dominated by special interest money? Joining us now is Fox News contributor Sarah Carter, the author of Why We Fight, Fox News national security strategist Sebastian Gorka, and the author of The Russia Hoax, Fox News legal analyst Greg Jarrett, who's joining us here in New York. Greg, I want to start with you because I think part of the story that's really missing at this point is what was the pretext? What was the precursor, if you will, as to why the FBI would even go talk to Flynn, given that the administration had literally been in office for hours at that point?
It was a faulty premise and a lie. These are the documents filed today. And in them, we learned that, yes, the FBI had a transcript of a perfectly legal conversation between Michael Flynn and Ambassador Kislyak. They used that, however, as a pretext to lie to Flynn, to entice him into granting an interview, to ensnare him in the crime of making a false statement, even though the FBI agents determined at the end of the interview that he did not make a false statement, which invites the question, why is a guy who told the truth being charged with the crime of lying? That's something I hope Judge Emmett Sullivan on Tuesday at the sentencing poses to the Mueller team of partisans. Why are you charging this guy with something he didn't do? And perhaps ask Flynn himself, were you coerced? Did these prosecutors over here threaten to prosecute your son? Did they bring such an immense, powerful case against you that you became financially broke and had to throw in the towel?
Dr. Gorka, you've been in the White House. You were there at the beginning of the Trump administration. And given General Flynn's background, 33 years of service to this country, and the position that he had been in and was going to be in, he had to have known, in fact, he did know, that conversation with the ambassador from Russia had been recorded, correct?
Well, you would think that, yes, he would know that, but let's be very clear about what he was doing. I worked for General Flynn in the transition team for the NSC after the election, the official presidential transition team. And it was our job to reach out to our interlocutors, whether it's allies in NATO or whether it's other countries of geostrategic importance like Russia. So the fact that he was doing what he was mandated to do as the only cabinet level official who is not congressionally approved means that he was absolutely in his lane. The fact that he misremembered the content or one specific element of a phone conversation. Jason, if that's a crime, then every single person watching this show could commit a felony when they forget what they said to somebody. So this is entrapment of the highest order, and the fact that they had the transcript tells you everything that you need to know. Also, the two agents who did that interview said that they didn't think he was lying, and then the 302s disappear for 8 months.
Yeah, so
this is a classic abuse of power.
That's what I want to ask Sarah about, because Sarah, you do some of the best reporting, period, but you've done some great reporting on this. These agents go over, they talk to General Flynn, but as Sebastian Gorka just mentioned, he knows that he's already been recorded, so he knows that they have the transcript because that's just part of his job. But why this delay? What's this mystery about the interview, which happens in January, and then suddenly this 302 showing up in August?
So we have this 302 in August, and let me go back to say something, Jason. You know, General Flynn was the head of the Defense Intelligence Agency. I had interviewed a number of people, even as far back as in December 2016, and then going into the first months of President Trump's presidency. Well, he was president-elect, and after all this news broke, absolutely, General Flynn would know and did know, based on his job, that phone conversations with somebody like Ambassador Kislyak were being recorded. Let's go to the meeting that he had the very first January 24th with the two FBI agents. You know, I was the first to report about this, and that both agents, both Peter Strzok and Joe Pietka, who were both the two agents that interviewed him, believed after they left that interview that he did not lie whatsoever. Now we see that in writing. In fact, they felt he was so forthcoming because he had actually delivered information to them that only they knew. Flynn had no idea that they knew that they had this. So when he was just so open about everything, they went back to the field office and they said, look, we don't believe he's lying. I mean, this is a straightforward, you know, this guy is very congenial. He's talking to us. He's very open with us. He sees us as an ally. And then what happens? We see Mueller trying to take him down. Let me tell you something here. I have talked to a number of FBI officials, former officials, senior officials, people in the Directorate of Security at the State Department. They said this is the most egregious abuse of power that they have ever seen. And Jason, as we're seeing right now, they are investigating every part of President Trump's life, his campaign. Yeah. They are going after him with full force. Now, and the 302 they didn't even turn over the original 302. That's right. By the way, that August 302 is an interview with Peter Strzok about the January 24th interview.
Now, Greg, we've seen, you know, you have Director Comey, who's suddenly full of memories and experiences when he goes on his book tour. He can't seem to come up with the same information when he talks to Mr. Gowdy or Mr. Radcliffe and he's under oath, but he suddenly has his full memory when he's on his book tour. Right. There is an exchange, actually, between Comey and Yates, who's the acting attorney general. Again, they're days into this new administration. What do you make of that exchange?
Yeah, Comey was hiding the fact that he was going to send over FBI agents to interview Flynn. He was hiding it from Yates. And when they said, we're not going to tell her until right before the interview. And she got mad about it. That's in today's court documents. But she didn't stop it. So, you know, they lied to Flynn to get the interview. And also in today's documents, they had a scheme where we're not going to tell him that we have a transcript and we'll try to ensnare him into making a false statement. In the end, they didn't do that. But what's really disturbing is not just lying to Flynn, but encouraging him not to have an attorney there, and several other deceptions that are all contained in this document, which is really a document of corruption by the FBI.
I think it's going to be fascinating with Judge Sullivan and what he's going to do at the first part of the week here. But I want to move on to Mr. Cohen in the minute or so that we have left. And Sebastian Gorka, I want to ask you about this. Alan Dershowitz has come out and said, you know, there are some things that are wrong, but there are other things that are illegal. And Mr. Cohen doesn't seem to know the difference between the two. What is the role of this attorney who's advising then Donald Trump? What's your take on what's going on here?
That this man is a scumbag. It's very simple. He's a liar. He's a scumbag. He was caught avoiding taxes on more than $3 million worth of income. He had to make something up to save his skin. This is what he did. This is a man who doesn't understand that he's trying to paint a picture that if your client tells you to do something illegal, you, as the lawyer, aren't obliged to tell him, I'm not going to do that. He's making things up. This is a man, let's remind everybody, who illegally recorded his phone conversations with his clients. That's
real
what you
quick,
need to know about Cohen.
Sarah, I want to give you the last word on your thoughts on what we've seen with Mr. Cohen in that interview.
Oh, well, of course, you know, Mr. Cohen is trying to reframe himself. We saw in that interview he's trying to change the American perception of him. And Mr. Cohen is a liar. He is being convicted. And as Sebastian said, you know, Mueller was trying to compose using Cohen. He is trying to compose some type of argument to find some way to indict President Trump. But in the end, Michael Cohen cannot be trusted. He's proven that. He is just not worthy of being trusted. And personally, his attempts to try to change his image are just not working.
Yeah, I thought it was fascinating in that interview. At one point, Mr. Cohen says, now, truthfully, and then he starts answering, and you kind of have to giggle and say, really? Truthfully? Okay, sure, we believe you. Exactly. Thank you, Sebastian, Sarah, and Greg. You always are some of the best and most insightful. We appreciate you being here on this beautiful Friday night. Let's move on to another important topic. The Democrats finally showing some self-awareness that they've moved way too far to the left, and maybe, just maybe, they've overreached. Watch this.
The weakness of the Republican Party has let the Democratic Party, I think, get further out than I think the majority of people want. So there's plenty of opportunity for Republicans if they just pause, kind of look at the world as it really is, and try to come up with something in the tradition of Lincoln and Eisenhower.
I think one of the mistakes that we make as a party is spending too much time talking about the gender thing. You know, we are a party of all kinds of people. And, you know, white working class men have traditionally been a huge part of our party. We have lost a lot of them. And one of those reasons is we've had a tendency to talk maybe too much about gender.
I wish that the press would spend a lot more time on what we need to do here to meet the needs of the American people, instead of morning, noon, and night allegations against the president. That the Justice Department, the Mueller investigation, they'll work their will. But there are other things that are going on that are newsworthy, and I think you'd have more viewers or readers if it would address concerns that people have, rather than just this ongoing coverage of what's current with the president from one day to the next.
Whoa, mainstream media. You know it's bad when Nancy Pelosi is criticizing you for doing too much over there on the left. Listen, joining me now for a reaction, former Obama economic advisor Austin Goolsbee and radio talk show host Larry Elder. Thank you, gentlemen, for being here. Larry, I want to ask you, when you've got Pelosi, Governor Brown, Moonbeam Brown, and Claire McCaskill making the case that, hey, the left is going too far left, the media is paying attention to things that really don't matter. What's your take on it?
Well, when you have, as you pointed out, Governor Jerry Moonbeam Brown lecturing the Democratic Party that they've gotten too far to the left, maybe, just maybe, they've gotten too far to the left. This is a governor, by the way, who probably thinks global warming is a bigger peril than even Al Gore does. He wants single payer. He wants this bullet train to nowhere. And here he is lecturing the Democratic Party that they've gone too far to the left. I think it's a sign of the apocalypse. And regarding Claire McCaskill, this is a woman who's basically saying that we've gotten too much involved with identity politics. When she first ran, Jason, she said George W. Bush let people die on rooftops during Hurricane Katrina because they were poor and because they were black. It was outrageous. She played the race card then. And maybe her saying that we play the gender card too much means for the first time Democrats will stop lying to women and telling them falsely, as they do every single year, that women make less money doing the very same work that men do. They say that women make 87 cents on the dollar compared to men for doing the very same work. They say that all the time to gin up anger against the Republican Party that does not want to raise the minimum wage. It's a lie. So maybe they'll stop doing it. One more thing, too, real fast.
Go ahead.
Notice, however, you have Jerry Brown and Claire McCaskill both no longer going to be in office. That's when politicians all of a sudden start getting really, really honest.
Yeah,
Too bad they're not like that when they're in office.
That happens on both sides of the aisle, I can tell you that. Austin, when you have Pelosi, you have McCaskill, you have Brown, do you agree with them or disagree with them? Is the left going too far left, or are they wrong?
Well, you had three different statements in there. I thought Nancy Pelosi's statement, I did somewhat agree. That if the media is going to spend all their time talking about Mueller or talking about investigating the president and not about giving health care to Americans or protecting the ACA or talking about policy, I agree with Pelosi. Now, I am really surprised that you guys took comfort from what Jerry Brown said, because the whole context of Jerry Brown's interview was him saying the Republican Party has gone crazy and that the president is so far out of line that it doesn't provide any check on the Democrats, and so it unleashes more extreme forces within the Democratic Party. But the whole context was about the Republican Party.
I don't think I find comfort. I don't think I find comfort in Governor Brown here. But real quickly, do you think they're going to take their own advice, or these 80? I think it's 80+ investigations the Democrats have already announced. Do you think they're actually going to do that and impeach the president? We've got just a minute. Got to go quickly, Austin.
Look, they're going to do investigations. I hope the president didn't commit crimes. If he did, he's going to be in trouble. But they're going to do policy in addition to investigations.
Larry, what's your thought?
Jason, what Austin is saying is that the Democratic Party has moved too far to the left because Republicans won't move the way they want them to move. I'm really confused. Governor Brown said we've gone too far to the left.
That's what Jerry Brown said. I didn't say that.
I didn't say you did. I said, but your analysis is that he's blaming the Republicans for it. Explain that to me.
Well, we're going to have to explain that.
That's what he said. Those were his words.
We're going to thank you, gentlemen, both for having it. It's fascinating to me to see now that the Democrats get control of the House. Suddenly they. Welcome back to this special edition of Hannity, Trump versus the establishment. Joining me now with the latest update on one of the president's most notable establishment foes, Hillary Clinton, and the ongoing investigation into her private email server, among others, Fox News correspondent Trace Gallagher. Trace.
Jason, good evening to you. Hillary Clinton initially objected and refused to answer questions about ClintonMail.com, her private email system. But after District Judge Emmett Sullivan ordered her to do so, the former Secretary of State submitted written answers, which have now been acquired by the conservative Judicial Watch. In her answers, Mrs. Clinton says the system was set up in 2009 by an aide to her husband, the former president, and that the system was set up for, quote, the purpose of convenience. But Judicial Watch President Tom Fitton says it's simply not credible to say the email was for convenience. Fitton reminds us that District Judge Royce Lamberth once called the Clinton email issue, quote, one of the gravest modern offenses to government transparency, and ordered additional discovery into whether Hillary Clinton's email was instead an attempt to shelter documents and stymie the Freedom of Information Act. Meantime, financial experts who filed a whistleblower complaint against the Clinton Foundation have now testified before the House Oversight Oversight Committee, confirming the FBI does have an open and ongoing investigation into the foundation. The tax and financial forensic experts also claim they obtained thousands of pages of documents on the Clinton Foundation containing evidence of pay-to-play, financial crimes, and showing the foundation operated more like a family partnership than a nonprofit. But that same oversight hearing blew up when the financial experts refused to turn over 6,000 pages of documents they say back up their claims. That prompted GOP Oversight Chairman Mark Meadows to warn them that his patience is running out. And breaking right now, a federal judge just ruled the Affordable Care Act, or Obamacare, is unconstitutional because without the individual mandate, the penalty that mandates you have insurance, the law is invalid because it cannot pay for itself. Jason.
Wow. Trace, thank you. President Trump reacting to Obamacare ruling, writing, "As I predicted all along, Obamacare has been struck down as an unconstitutional disaster. Now Congress must pass a strong law that provides great health care and protects pre-existing conditions. Mitch and Nancy, get it done." Joining me now with reaction, Florida Congressman Gates and Arizona Congressman Andy Biggs. Now, Congressman Biggs, I served with these two gentlemen in the 115th Congress. It's good to have you on tonight. I do appreciate this. I want to start with Andy Biggs. The Republicans are soon to be in the minority of the House. How do you keep all of these Republican-led investigations going, or are they just going to be dismissed and they're done with it?
Well, the only way we can really keep them going, since they're going to pull the plug on us from the Democrat side, is to use the investigations that they've promised that they're going to open up to our advantage. And so we see things like the OGR hearing, the subcommittee hearing, where we start looking at what was going on today with the Clinton Foundation investigation. And guess what? Huber wasn't there again. So one of our responsibilities is going to keep pushing the DOJ to make sure they respond, even if it's the Democrats that are holding hearings on the Trump administration or other Trump officials. We have to demand the DOJ and FBI provide transparency in the documents, because I think when those come out, we're going to find that, just as we see in the Clinton Foundation scandal, that there's ample evidence of, pay-for-play, misuse of funds, commingling of funds.
Yeah, and this is an important thing in the cohesiveness that can be there between the House and the Senate and working together, because in the Senate they are in the majority. But Matt Gaetz, you've been instrumental, you've been aggressive in these investigations. What do you think has to happen next?
Well, Andy Biggs just laid out how Huber did not show up to the oversight hearing, so we don't know if he's doing his job or not. What we do know is that Congress isn't doing its job. Jim Comey is coming back in on Monday, and that really is, I think, a smoke screen. We want Rosenstein. We're hungry for Rosenstein, and our leadership is feeding us Jim Comey bite by bite. The reason we need to hear from Rosenstein is because he knows about this plan to wiretap the president and potentially remove him from office.
But why hasn't it come up? I mean, you've been calling for this.
I can tell you why.
Why?
I can tell you why. Our leadership knows that the first question we're going to ask Rosenstein is which members of the cabinet he was speaking to potentially invoke the 25th Amendment and run the president out of town. And some of those people may still be serving in the cabinet. And I think that they're doing everything they can to make sure that in the final days of Republican control, we can't ask Rosenstein who he was talking to and who he was scheming with to undermine and potentially end the presidency of Donald Trump. I want those answers. The American people want those answers. And by the way, Jason, your book, The Deep State, lays the premise, lays the foundation for the fact that this stuff actually happens. But with the Democrats in charge, we're not going to get the answers. And that's why we need to have Rosenstein before the Republican-controlled Judiciary Committee.
And Andy, who else? Congressman Biggs, I should say.
Yeah, no, you're good. You're good, Jason.
That's what we always call each other. We are there in the halls of Congress. But nevertheless, what else can you do in these last few weeks? Is there anything else that the Congress can actually do to get accountability in the last few weeks?
Well, Matt's exactly right. And we have to request, push, everything that we've been doing, Matt and I have been doing literally for over a year to get Rosenstein in there. If we can get Rosenstein in there, we can start answering some questions. And then from there, then we have to rely on the Senate. The Senate's going to have to continue. We're going to have to continue by pushing the holes in the Democrat. But
do you believe
in the last 2 weeks? Yeah, it's going to be tough.
Do you believe there should be a second special prosecutor?
Of course there should be,
Yes,
Jason. And,
yes.
I mean,
Yeah.
and,
All right,
and
both
think
these,
about it.
You know what? I tell you what, both these gentlemen are in favor of the second special prosecutor. I need to ask you about a former colleague of ours, the congressman from South Carolina, Mick Mulvaney, who's the head of the Office of Management and Budget, today being tapped by President Trump to be the deputy chief of staff. Your thoughts on Mick Mulvaney? Let's start with Congressman Gates.
I met with Mick Mulvaney actually over at the White House today. We were talking about other budget matters. But look, Mick Mulvaney is a workhorse. He knows these spending issues inside and out. He also understands the intricacies of the oversight process that you previously led, Jason. So having Mick Mulvaney by the president's side during these difficult times shows the importance of a wartime consigliere. Mick's going to do a great job. I think the president made a great choice. And I'm excited that we've got a true movement conservative, someone who really believes in the conservative movement and believes in the president, fighting alongside our president for the great agenda for the country.
Your thoughts, Andy Biggs, on Mick Mulvaney as deputy chief of staff?
Well, I think he's smart, he's articulate, and one of the things I love about Mick is that he doesn't suffer fools gladly. He's going to tell it like it is and make sure the work gets done. And he's also, as Matt said, a movement conservative. He's going to go with the president's line. He's going to help the president achieve his agenda. And we need that.
I got to tell you, my own experience with Mick Mulvaney, he is tenacious. He's this tenacious Irishman. He did serve with me on the Oversight and Government Reform Committee. He is an expert in the numbers, heading up the Office of Management and Budget. He had the support of the Speaker and a lot of others. He's very close with the whole delegation there for the South Carolina delegation. He ran for the Republican Study Committee, a committee that was chaired by Jim Jordan, by Mike Pence, by others, and he lost to a guy named Bill Flores. But nevertheless, I think a lot of people have really appreciated Mick, and I think we're all excited to see him as the chief of staff to the president. He will, I think, bring a lot of conservative voice there to the Congress. But Congressman, thank you for joining us on this beautiful Friday night. The
Thanks,
left
Jason.
politicizes a tragedy on the border. You won't believe this one. And later, Sean Hannity's exclusive interview with outgoing UN Ambassador Nikki Haley. We'll be right back.
Becoming your parents.
Took quite a bit of work because this was a lot. This is all staple.
But we can protect your home and auto when you bundle with us.
Welcome back to this special edition of Hannity, Trump versus the establishment. Sadly, tonight, we're learning more about a 7-year-old girl from Guatemala who died at the border earlier this month after being apprehended with her father and others in the remote desert of New Mexico. She reportedly was without food and water for days during the treacherous journey. And according to a new report, her father did not alert authorities to any health issues until 8 hours after they had been apprehended. Now, Department of Homeland Security Secretary Kirstjen Nielsen reacted to the tragedy earlier today. Take a look.
Yeah, it's heart-wrenching is what it is, and my heart goes out to the family, all of DHS. You know, this is just a very sad example of the dangers of this journey. This family chose to cross illegally. What happened here was they were 90 miles away from where we could process them. I cannot stress how dangerous this journey is when migrants choose to come here illegally.
Sad, no matter how you look at it. Unfortunately, Democrats are rushing to politicize the tragedy. For example, Senator Richard Blumenthal is putting blame on the, quote, people and practices, end quote, of the U.S. government. Joining me now for a reaction, GOPAC Chairman David Avella and Fox News contributor Richard Fowler, who is here with me in studio in New York. And thank you so much for being here.
Good to be here, Jason.
I've been fairly critical of Democrats and their messaging to those that would be applying for asylum and making the march from Central America here. What do you tell those people who maybe do want to seek a better way of life? Do you encourage them to come north as they're doing, or do you say stay put? What's your message to them?
Listen, I think we have to come up with some sort of compromise, because here's what we do know, right? We know that Guatemala, Nicaragua, and Honduras are one of the 3 most dangerous countries on earth, right? And we know those people they're fleeing poverty, they're fleeing death, and all they want to do is come here and taste the American dream, just as generations did in Ellis Island not so long ago. And so I think we've got to find a balanced approach to solve this. Yes, we need to increase our border security, but at the same time, we've either got to work with these governments to make their countries safer so the people can stay there, or we have got to hire some more immigration judges to go through these asylum claims a little bit quicker.
And just quite frankly, I think the message should be no, stay there, stay in your own country of origin. I'll go to the embassy, apply for the 90 different visas,
but they're not going to do
don't
that.
march north. But that's the moral message that should be there. And that's the problem is I get the sense that Democrats are saying, yeah, come on up and apply. David, how do you see this situation?
Let's never forget the Democrats' nominee for president in 2016 said in Brazil she couldn't wait until there was no border. And you have Democrat after Democrat who have co-sponsored legislation that ultimately encourage sanctuary cities that want an open border. And so what they focus on is a U.S. that has no border. And they're not really focusing on a few things that Richard said, which were spot on, is that we got to look at the problems in the origin countries and what we can do to put pressure on them to improve their economic conditions and quit bellying up with foreign entities that ultimately want to do damage to the U.S.
So now Richard was shaking his head. Let me give Richard a chance.
So David, I will give you the fact that we can work to solve the international problems. But with that being said, I think this ideal to think that Democrats want open borders is just not true. And the Bordering Fencing Act we passed in 2006 under Speaker Pelosi.
Do you think Pelosi said she thought the wall was immoral? Do you think the wall is immoral?
No, I think the wall's ineffective. I think there's other ways we live.
So would you tear it down?
Well, there isn't a wall there currently.
There is a lot of wall there.
There's fencing, but it's not the wall that Donald Trump is saying.
Would you tear down the wall if you think it's ineffective?
I think the fencing that we currently have there is fine, but I think we live in 2018. We have drones. We can hire more border patrol. There's other things we can do to secure our border besides building a wall. Because here's what's going to happen when you build a wall: people are just going to get a higher ladder and cross over it again. So I think it's ineffective to say we're just going to have a wall and that's going to solve all of our problems.
We have only seconds remaining, David. What do you think the message should be, and what is going to happen with this shutdown that's pending?
The message is we need to know who's entering this country. The president and Congress need to focus on the fact that Americans want border security. It's as simple as this. It is a winning message for Republicans. It's the right path for America. And to the last point that I was making is that, look, we have these foreign dictators down in South America who are cozying up to Russia, allowing fighter jets to come in there. And if we don't think this is a major national security issue that our country is facing.
Gentlemen, thank you. Look, the sad reality is we have a 7-year-old girl who has died, and she should have never, ever made that journey. Right. And that should be the message. Don't make this journey. It will kill you. And that should be the message. I've got to move on. Thank you, gentlemen, both. Sean Hannity's revealing interview with outgoing UN Ambassador Nikki Haley is coming up next. Don't miss it. Welcome back to this special edition of Hannity. In October, U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations, Nikki Haley, announced she would be resigning her position at the United Nations at the end of the year. Yesterday, Ambassador Haley spoke with Sean about her time at the UN, her working relationship with President Trump, and much, much more. Take a look.
All right, joining us now is U.S. Ambassador to the UN, former Governor Nikki Haley is with us. Ambassador, good to see you. Congratulations. You know, I look over the last 2 years, a little less than 2 years, and what do I see? We saw what's happened in North Korea. Jerusalem is now the capital of Israel. It's now been moved to its proper home. We've watched ISIS being shut down. The Iranian sanctions have been put in place and seem effective. American strength abroad, I would argue, has never been stronger, but you have the front row seat. So am I right in my perceptions?
I mean, America has found her voice back again. It is a good time for America in the world. Now, for some countries, that's a good thing, and for some countries, that's a bad thing. For Americans, that's a great thing, because I think what we've basically seen is that it was time for us to start talking about what we believed in and what we didn't. When I came in, they had just had a Cuban-sponsored resolution that was anti-American, that basically blamed America for everything. And the United States abstained on that vote. I came in after they did the anti-Israel bias, and instead of standing up for our friends in Israel, we again abstained on our vote. This is a new day and a new time where we don't abstain. You know exactly where the United States stands. You know what we're for, you know what we're against, and you know where we're going. And so I think there's a lot of moral clarity for the United States now, and I think countries appreciate that we're now very straightforward.
I've watched an interview, and you talk about your relationship with the president. It sounds to me, correct me if I'm wrong, like it was a good cop, bad cop routine. Like you would use whatever the issue was, you would use his strength, that he would go out and be combative. It seems like the world leaders believe him when he says something, and that you would use that in your negotiations. Explain how the dynamic worked.
Well, I think the only thing is I didn't make him out to be the bad cop. What I said was, this is where the president is. Unless we get this done, I can't promise you where he's going to go because he's upset and we need to move forward. The president and I have a great relationship. It was a great partnership. We respected each other. I let him be him. I turned around and just used his unpredictability as an advantage, because it is. For many who say people don't know what to expect from the United States, that's not a bad thing. And so I use that as leverage. I use that as ways of getting us what we needed. And he was always great in making sure that he never let anybody get comfortable. And so I always saw it as a great working relationship.
Did you come to find that, though, as maybe good cop, bad cop was a bad phrase. Maybe the way to say it, though, is he likes to keep everybody on his toes, and he knows exactly what he's doing. That's what I have discovered. Do you agree with that statement?
Absolutely, absolutely, in every way whatsoever. You know, his strong point really is communicating to leaders around the world. And I would always tell the president and strongly believe, if you get him in front of any world leader, he wins them. He completely wins them. And if any world leader threatens the United States, he puts the absolute fear of God into them. And, you know, for me, it is the reason our foreign policy is so strong. It's the reason why we have been so effective, is because the president has said very clearly what he will do, what he won't do. But most importantly, he stood by it. When he said if they used chemical weapons, there would be price to pay, and then he followed through with it, that said a lot to the international community that you can't take this president for granted.
What's funny to me is, if NATO doesn't believe that we might pull back on some of our, we pay, what, 72 cents of every dollar, right, and the president is challenging them to pay more. If Mexico, Canada, China, and our European allies, if they don't believe the president is really going to, there's really going to be consequences as it relates to trade deals, they'll never negotiate. So I think there's a force and a wisdom, sort of like the art of the deal. And I know everybody gets panicked. Like, I think there was a lot of panic over Little Rocket Man, my button's bigger than yours, and, you know, fire and fury. But look at where we now have an opportunity of having the entire Korean Peninsula nuclear free.
Well, and I'll tell you, first of all, look at NATO. Now all the countries are paying more. So what he did worked. When you look at North Korea, it was that rhetoric combined with General McMaster at the NSC at the time calling different countries, telling them to, you know, expel diplomats, not to allow them to have embassies. And then all of that work allowed for us to get those sanctions done at the United Nations. And so I will tell you, while people didn't like what he was saying or how he was saying it, what it allowed me to do was say, he's being honest, he's very truthful. We need to pass these sanctions, or I can promise you, if there is a threat, he will respond.
I agree with you about the Saudi Arabia situation, and I find that people have been far too simplistic in their analysis of it. It's far more complicated than that. And I believe he's responsible. In my heart, I think the evidence will show eventually, if it has not already. I obviously don't have access to that kind of intelligence. But there's also other things, and we've got to look contextually through history. We had to align with Stalin in World War II to defeat Hitler, a mass murderer, but we did. I look at the emerging alliance of the United States, Israel, the Saudis, Jordanians, Egyptians, Emirates against Iranian hegemony as maybe a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to thread a needle. It is frustrating that they did this. I've been probably the loudest critic against Saudi Arabia for years. Treatment of women, gays and lesbians, persecution of Christian and Jews. I don't know the answer, but I think it's far more complicated, especially believing that they did this to Khashoggi. What are your thoughts?
It's a very complicated situation, but it is one that can be handled and can be solved. First of all, If you have Saudi officials going into a Saudi consulate, the Saudi government is responsible, which makes MBS responsible, period. That's just what we know. Secondly, our United States principles, values will not allow us to give them a pass, and we shouldn't. And I think that the president made a good first step when he sanctioned the 17 individuals. I think we need to continue to have harsh conversations with the Saudis about how this doesn't fit the means of international norms. It's not accepted by the United States, and we can't continue to partner with someone that continues to brutalize people in this way. And I think we have to decide what accountability is going to look like for them. But at the same time, when we talk about the Houthis in Yemen, when we talk about Hezbollah in Lebanon, when we talk about Iran and their role in Syria, we cannot look at Saudi Arabia and not see that they've been such a good partner.